topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Bill Martinez Show. Great to have you with us. We're going to have my good friend, Dr. Carol Swain, up with us in just a few moments, but just a little bit of background from her new book, The Adversity of Diversity. Ever since the U.S. Supreme Court announced its landmark 6-3 decision to take race out of the equation for college and university admissions, it did more than just bring affirmative action in higher education to a screeching halt. It also fired a warning shot across the bow of businesses and governmental agencies across America. The days for workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, but as you know, we call it DIE because DEI, that's what it amounts to. It's a killer. It's programs that violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. As I mentioned to you, Dr. Carol Swain joins us. Her incredible background, you go back and you consider, I mean, what a success story that is, again, one of those success stories that I think can only happen in America. I mean, from a high school dropout, a teenage mother, the former university professor of political science and professor of law at Vanderbilt University Law School is with us right now. Dr. Carol Swain. Carol, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, congratulations on this book. Why did you and your co-author said the timeliness was perfect for The Adversity of Diversity?
Well, Bill, we have talked many times, and I have grappled with these issues for years. In fact, about 5 years ago, I started a book, which I didn't complete, on why diversity training is all wrong. Because back then, I saw that diversity training programs were not effective. They accomplished the opposite of what they purported to do, and they created a lot of divisiveness. And so you ask about the timing of this book. It was 90% completed before the Supreme Court decision, and the 10% was waiting on the decision because I had anticipated that the court had to strike down race-based affirmative action because the DEI and CRT programs had become so aggressively discriminatory against whites and Asians. And so there was always that chance that they wouldn't do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And then if they had not struck it down, the fallback plan was, the title was going to be How They Missed This Opportunity to Bring About, a Better America.
Exactly.
So, that's a little bit, I anticipated the fall of affirmative action only if our Constitution and our civil rights laws meant anything. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court stood up to the occasion.
Dr. Swain, what is the most important thing that readers should take away from your book?
I think that for people out there, first I'm going to speak to whites and Asians, is that you are protected by the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment and our U.S. civil rights laws. And this also applies to men in the workplace. If you are a male, if you are a Christian, you're protected because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its extensions prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, and religion. And we find today that men are targeted, heterosexuals are targeted, Christians are targeted, and whites and Caucasians are targeted because of the color of their skin or other immutable characteristics. And so that is totally contrary to who we are as Americans. In the 1960s, we decided to be colorblind under the law. We passed 3 major civil rights acts, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act and the 1968 Open Housing Act, and we became colorblind under the law. The prejudices that have remained have come from individual hearts. And so I want people out there to know that one is that you're protected by laws. You need to know how to document discrimination when it occurs in the workplace. And there are whites who are successfully suing their workplaces, and also men. I read recently about a male employee that was able to successfully sue because his boss, who was female, told him he needed to man up. So that's one thing. But Gannett, that owns newspapers, across the country, they were sued recently by 4 white employees. They were let go in 2020 because the company wanted to be more diverse. And so you can't be doing these things in this country. So that's part of what I want people to know.
It really puts the power back in their hands. But again, ignorance is no excuse. This book will enlighten you to realize and re-encourage you to realize that, yes, that's right, we're still a constitutional republic, because all this other stuff that's getting in the way, Carol, is social engineering, isn't it? And every time you bring social engineering into the equation, it is unfair, it is manipulative, and it's destructive to the human spirit, the way I observe it.
Yes, and Bill, there's something else, like maybe I'm the elephant in the room right now, because people will say, especially those on the left, well, you used affirmative action, to rise up, and you climbed that ladder, and now you're pulling it up behind you. And I can tell you that I benefited from the 1964 Civil Rights Act that ended discrimination. I benefited from outreach and recruitment that came for people like me. At that time, they were looking for talented minorities.
Right.
So when I started college, I went to a community college and made the dean's list there a couple of times, did not intend to continue my education. And when I decided to continue my education, I made the decision that I was going to be an honest student. And what did I do? I purchased and checked out books in the library on how to make A's in college, how to take essay exams, how to take objective tests. I applied the principles, and I graduated from my 4-year college, Roanoke College, predominantly white Lutheran school in the South, magna cum laude, while working full-time nights and weekends at the community college library. And then I went on to graduate schools that I got into based on my scores. And eventually I was steered into academia. I became a professor at Princeton. I earned early tenure. My first book won 3 national prizes, including the highest prize a political scientist can win. And I've been cited by the U.S. Supreme Court. So, you can say that all of my accomplishments were because of affirmative action. You can say that because I'm Black, and no Black person or woman or any minority can really defend themselves, because affirmative action has been around, since the longer than 1970s. It's been around in the form of executive orders since 1960s, and it's used to dismiss the accomplishments of racial and ethnic minorities who are high achieving.
Well, Carol, when you consider the merit and all the hard work you put into it, I imagine anybody that dare throw out the affirmative action card, it just has to just go away. I dealt a little bit with that. I don't know if I told you my story or not, but believe it or not, in broadcasting in Los Angeles in 1972, when I exited the Marine Corps, I was the first Hispanic with a Hispanic name on a contemporary radio station in Los Angeles. This is 1972, Carol. And I know that a little bit of the opportunity and the door that opened for me was a result of the FCC, putting pressure on licensees of radio station to hire minorities. But, it opened the door, gave me an opportunity. And I went and encouraged other people that they needed to follow suit. And I remember giving several speeches to minority colleges and to the kids there and saying, look, the door is open for you. You had not even thought about entering broadcasting. But the fact of the matter is okay, I'm a bit of a pioneer. Maybe I opened the door, but let's go in. And now today, Los Angeles has dozens of Hispanics involved in local media there.
Right. And here's the thing. Again, we benefited from non-discrimination. Discrimination was taking place before that. We benefited from non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and recruitment. Because after the law passed prohibiting discrimination based on immutable characteristics, then well-meaning people, Caucasians, really sought talented minorities. And at that time, you had an equal opportunity to succeed or fail. And Bill, I know that many people along the way who tried to do what you did, they failed. And I know people too that failed out. And a lot of times it had to do with later when affirmative action became so aggressive, it allowed people to get into places where they were truly, truly not qualified and they could not make it. Many of those people, I believe, could have been successful had they followed my path. I started at a community college. Anyone can go to a community college. And I was able to prove myself there at that community college. I had been a high school dropout. I did not have a high school record. I had an opportunity to prove myself at the community college. And then I used my performance there to get into a 4-year school, graduated magna cum laude. I've been inducted in Phi Beta Kappa. And so I've benefited from the open doors, but also people that pushed me and encouraged me, because I never, ever in my wildest dreams ever imagined or wanted to be a university professor. When I started out, I just wanted a well-paying job. I had children. I needed a good job. That's what I was looking for.
Exactly. We're talking with Dr. Carol Swain, her book, The Adversity of Diversity. Carol, your book suggests real unity training as a solution to move beyond the divisiveness toward healing in a post-affirmative action world. Break that down for our audience.
I can tell you that in the concluding chapter of my book, I talk about an idea that was birthed in 2020, right after during the riots that followed George Floyd's death. And it's one of those things that I would consider spiritual. I was just grappling with all the turmoil taking place in the country and just watching these corporations pour, billions of dollars into Black Lives Matter and into sensitivity training that I knew would not solve the problem, because they're based on conflict theory, a conflict model. And in the middle of the night or sometime while I was tossing and turning, I heard very clearly unity training. And so the next morning I jumped up and purchased the domain name Unity Training Solutions. And a few months later, I started a company that was based on E Pluribus Unum, a national motto, out of many, one. And I believe that people need to know our civil rights laws, because we have civil rights protections. There's nothing wrong with that. If diversity training was about providing people information they needed about the laws of the land, it would be less controversial. But when it singles out people because of their race or their sex or their religion, and it pits workers and employees one against another, then it crosses the line. And so pretty much what the book argues and what I try to do is provide an alternative that's consistent with E Pluribus Unum and getting our companies and our organizations back on mission. They have strayed. They're doing social engineering. Our U.S. military, it's lost its way. The U.S. military has forgotten what the military was established to do. They're not focusing on protecting us from foreign and domestic enemies. They're focused on, their drag shows and making sure they have enough transgenders in the military.
Exactly.
It's crazy. And so with unity training, I think that companies, and we see some of this already happening because they're quietly getting rid of their DEI programs, that they need to get back to their missions. They don't need to be celebrating, special days unless it's a major holiday. And I believe that workers are ready for this. And what has happened with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not about bringing people into the workforce and integrating them. It's about affinity groups and people maintaining their separate identities. And equity is not equal opportunities, it's equal outcomes. And Bill and I doing our day. I'm probably making you older than you are.
I'm right with you. We're contemporaries.
Okay. Equal opportunity. You got a chance to prove yourself, and you worked very hard if you were going to be successful. Equity is about equal outcomes, and you have these crazy situations where the man in New York City who was a teacher, he was applying to take the teacher's exam. He failed it numerous times. They wouldn't even give a count of how many times he failed the test. He sued for racial discrimination and won $2 million. And so people like him who were not smart enough to pass the teacher's exam, when many racial and ethnic minorities have done so, he was rewarded for his ignorance. And you see, just such blatant discrimination and the reward of mediocrity.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sadly, this is where our culture is today, Carol, because of these social engineers and these people that are fighting for equity based on theory, which is amazing to me because we have enough human history to demonstrate time and again that doesn't work. But for some reason, that spirit of the theoretical has entered into our culture with madness. And we have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And we're trying to reinvent the wheel. And you go, why are we doing that when we know the empirical evidence and by past experience and by other countries who have tried to do the same thing, that it doesn't work? It is a failed experiment. And what are you doing? In some of these cases, Carol, I mean, these are generational issues. You get kids that are raised with this kind of faux theoretical humbo jumbo, and and they're disturbed the rest of their careers, thinking
They are.
It's not fair, right?
I mean, I think that's why we have so many flash mobs, and unfortunately, many of them are racial and ethnic minorities that are going into stores and helping themselves to the merchandise because they've been told that capitalism is evil and they are owed reparations and that other people's stuff belong to them. That's where we are today as a society. And getting back to unity training, it became very clear to me over the past 2 years that the training, it can't be for regular employees. It has to be the owners and the CEOs, because they're the only one who can change the culture. The HR departments are led by people who are indoctrinated in wokeness, and they live in fear. And a lot of what's taking place is taking place because there are people who are so fearful of the left. The left is able to bully people to the point that they get what they want, not because they deserve it, not because it works, but out of fear.
Yes. Well, unity is our strength. E pluribus unum, as you cited, Carol. We're stronger when we're unified. And think about that. Everybody associated, and you're exactly right. The drumbeat for unity has to start at the top with the visionary who continues to cast that and remind the employees, the team, that this is the mission. This is where they're going. And if somebody wants to go their own way and continue to disturb the unity force in the organization, then they need to be reclassified.
They do. And Bill, I've spoken with CEOs and owners of companies who have shared that they are afraid to speak to their own employees because they've allowed these affinity groups to be set up.
Right.
And they don't want to be sued, but they will be sued. They're going to be sued because they're discriminating usually against whites.
Yes.
They're discriminating against men. They're discriminating against heterosexuals. And often the people that are doing the discriminating, they either don't care or they don't know the law. So they will openly tell a white person or a heterosexual why they're discriminating. They would say, we're letting you go because we need to bring in, an Asian, or we need to bring in a Black, or we need to bring in some other group. They give you all the information you need to follow suit. And so
all you got to do is listen and take notes, right, Carol?
And document where you were, who was there, and get them to repeat it so you can record it. But discrimination is becoming very costly for corporations. And going back to the purpose of my book, I want to see better workplaces and a more effective society, and our military and our institutions to get back on track. And they have lost their way. And it's because they have started discriminating, against persons who are protected, and they have created all these tiers. And we see, the selective firing of people, hiring of people, and if we go to the legal world, I would say prosecutions, selective. Exactly.
Well, what disturbs me most about all this, Carol, is the human being, your fellow human being that's on this journey of life. I don't know that, people wake up every day and think, I'm just going to be the worst person I want to be. I want to be unaccomplished. I don't want to succeed in life. I just want to be mediocre. I just, that is antithetical to me. And, and I want the best for everyone, because it's that rising tide that raises all boats, right? I mean, if his boat is rising, our boat's going to rise. We'll all rise together. And here we are, blessed in this United States of America with a constitution that gives us an infrastructure in which to do that. And when we honor that, we can be the best we can be. I mean, here you are, you look back in your life and the way it started out, and you said, I just want to provide for my kids and, work and, have food on the table. And look what God has done for you, what you've done for yourself. And in the process, how you've mentored other people and deposited valuable information and wisdom into their lives. And they're all the difference, because Dr. Carol Swain, before that, Carol Swain, the high school dropout, decided to do something different.
And, Bill, when I was a teenager, I thought you had to be rich to go to college. I didn't know about scholarships, and it was so much information that I didn't have. And so that outreach made all the difference in the world, because I learned about opportunities that someone from my background would never have heard of. I believe that most Americans are in favor of outreach, to persons who are talented, but also for outreach to those failing schools. And what the left has done is, by forcing the hiring of people who are totally incompetent, who have not applied themselves, who have barely squeaked by in school, or they've been passed along, they doom, people that are trapped in inner city schools, they doom them to failure because the teachers are incompetent. You have principals who are incompetent. You have people in the military. The Biden administration is full of identity group representatives who are incompetent to do their jobs. And that helps no one. In fact, it hurts the groups that they come from, whether it's LGBT or Black or Hispanic. When you have a spokesperson of an agency and they're totally incapable of doing their jobs, in fact, they don't even know what the purpose of the agency was or is, then that hurts our nation, but it also hurts the group that they're representing.
Exactly. It has been purposeful, Carol, in my humble opinion. We have gone from a nation that was regarded as being exceptional to a nation that has accepted and accommodated mediocrity.
Right.
And, go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree 100%. And it saddens me what we have done to our young people. And it doesn't just impact racial and ethnic minorities, because the spillover effects has greatly damaged white youth. And you find them being totally ashamed of their race, the race that they were born into. And that's one of the reasons why I've been so outspoken about CRT, critical race theory, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, is because it's resulted in the shaming and bullying of young people. Sometimes it's in K through 12, but our college students, for the most part, they are targeted because of the color of their skin. Our nation was not set up, to encourage that. That is something that we rose above.
Mhm.
And yet, the people who say that it's wrong to discriminate against racial and ethnic minorities don't have any problem discriminating against whites or Asians
Amazing,
when
right?
they want to serve their own purposes and
Yeah.
needs.
Well, and our founding fathers envisioned an aspiration. They gave us an aspirational goal, and that aspiration was to, continue to progress toward a more perfect union, right? And somehow we've made a wrong turn, Carol.
Oh yes, we made a wrong turn, a wrong turn when we let the Marxists that fled Nazi Germany into the country, and they set up camp at Columbia University, and their ideas fanned out across the country. And slowly but surely, they have infiltrated and taken over so many of our institutions. And that's what we are reaping. We are reaping the fruits of the Marxism that has integrated itself into the fabric of American life.
Yeah, it is. It is disheartening, but the fact of the matter is, Carol, I know you feel the same way. I mean, we've got 340 million Americans. I have a lot of faith in the people, and they're starting. I see a kind of a return to first principles. This is one of the things that we talk about on our show, whether it's the radio show or the TV show, is that we must return to first principles. In organizations, when an organization has lost its way, this is where it is key when a leader comes in and says, wait a minute, let's go back and figure out when did the downturn occur? What
Right.
principles did we get off of? What new ideas in the name of progress did we embrace that actually ended up hurting us? And that is a unique form of leadership. It is a needed leadership that I say is especially needed, for a time such as this in this country.
I agree. And all the companies and organizations have to do is go to your file cabinet, pull out your old mission statement, read it, send it around to your employees, and decide that the mission of the organization, what it was founded to do, that should be what everyone works together as a team to advance. And a lot of the DEI, CRT nonsense that's coming to the workplace, it has been totally antithetical to the whole idea of what work and business should be about. And it's important to get back to the business of business, whatever your business was set up to do, or government entities or organizations, get back to the original purpose.
Well, exactly, because in business, they do that all the time. You're measured by your bottom line. But all of a sudden, these companies like, Disney and Target and Budweiser, and look at these examples, these glaring examples, they have lost billions of dollars, Carol. And this is insane that they continue to do this. And you you go, wait a minute, how much longer can the stockholder put up with this?
Well, I mean, we use those as examples, but a lot of us who have watched Chick-fil-A, they have bowed again and again and again to the left when they didn't have to. And we know that that was a company that was built on strong, solid Christian values. And what did they do a few years ago?
Yeah.
They brought in a woke DEI person. And since then, I guess everyone loves the fried chicken sandwich because it has not hurt them as much. But they have employees that, they're like Disney. You go into a Chick-fil-A now and the employees don't look so wholesome all the time and clean cut.
Right.
And I think that following, the way of the world or the trend of the world, it's bad for profits and stockholders and a company's image. You can't just rebrand your image that, that was used to build your greatness. Rebrand that. And during the time I was in college and my first degree was in business, I learned how the goal of businesses was to maximize profits. Exactly. And they had a fiduciary responsibility to stockholders. When did that go out the window? I think it went out the window when colleges and universities became so woke. They turned out students that were steeped in, the Marxism, and they've taken it into the workplace, and they've tried to recreate the college campus.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go back and live in the realm of the theoretical, as I say. We're talking with Dr. Carol Swain. She's the author of the new book, The Adversity of Diversity, Moving Beyond Divisiveness Towards Healing in a Post-Affirmative Action World. I, like you, Carol, my background, very heavy in business as well. I was blessed to be in a position to create 3 brand products. Having a brand product is hallowed. That is a hallowed goal and achievement for any company, because when you say that your job and your objective is to maximize profits, boy, they really maximize when you're branded. And it's also a massive decline, like what happened with Bud Light, when you violate, in a sense, your birthright and your brand.
I agree 100%. And, look at Disney, just
Oh.
how they have totally lost any sense of what Disney used to stand for. There's nothing wholesome about Disney any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you go and you take your daughter to Disney to a girl's store, and you're met in the doorway with a man dressed as a woman and has a mustache, it's a bit shocking, I have to say.
It is. And, I have a great grandson named Hezekiah, and he's 8. He wants to go to Disney. And unfortunately, grandma's never going to take him to Disney.
Right. Yeah. And that is unfortunate, because when you and I grew up, and I got to tell you, I've got a lot of great memories of the old days when Walt was alive. And particularly, I grew up in Southern California. So I had an opportunity, was very blessed to do a lot of promotions and events there at Disney in Anaheim, California. And it is a shell of itself. And it really breaks my heart, not only for the next generation, but even for the employees, because as you mentioned, Carol, the employees are forced into a paradigm that goes against their conscience. But, they want to, they need a job. In some aspects of Disney, it can be a lot of fun. There's entertainment there, but unfortunately, right now, it comes with strings attached, if you might say.
Yeah, I mean, some people feel like they have to choose when it comes to their mental health or even your soul, because they may ask you to do things that violate your conscience. If you're a devout Christian believer, you have to draw the line sometimes, and it may mean that you have to walk away from a job that has great benefits, is well paying, but it's asking you to do something that just totally runs counter to everything that you have stood for and believed.
Mm-hmm. Well, in your book, The Adversity of Diversity, you were able to get Alan Dershowitz to do the foreword for you. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, I asked him and he wrote the foreword, and he's a Democrat.
Yes, I know
but
that.
He's always believed in civil rights and equality, and he's not happy with what has happened in our country with critical race theory and DEI. He rightly sees that as a violation of the Constitution. And so we were fortunate to have him to write the endorsement, to write the forward. And then Marsha Blackburn and a number of other people have written endorsements for the book. And I believe that this book is one of the most important books I've written. It is co-authored with a man that I've known for some years that helps me with my books, because this book was self-published. It was not published with a major press. That's its own story. But Mike knows all aspects of what do you call it? Publication of
Yes,
books.
right.
And so, and he's also been a victim as a white male in his 60s. He used to work for a newspaper, and he was part of a downsizing, and he has seen the discrimination up front. So he's very excited, and this is our first co-authored book. But for the most part, these are ideas that I have worked on all of my life, I have believed in. And I think, again, that for people who love my book, Black Eye for America, or my Be the People book. This is the logical next book, and it's one that you need, because right now there are people out there that don't see the connection between the Supreme Court ending race-based college admissions and what's taking place in their workplace or what's taking place in their organization. There is a clear connection, because DEI and CRT has become a level imposed on top of old-fashioned affirmative action.
Right.
And there are people that don't know the history of affirmative action, that it was never a law passed by both houses of Congress and signed by the president. It was a series of executive orders, and any president could have written an executive order to overturn it. None of them had the courage to do so, but we have reached a point in America's history where we do need to move beyond the racial divisiveness that's come out of the DEI and CRT. Non-discrimination, civil rights laws, all of that was needed, but we did not need what we have today, which is something that violates the law.
You know, what encourages me about this, Carol, is that we have a rise of common sense. That's what caused this organic movement, is that you could no longer defend DEI, CRT. It was an emotional response. There was lack of intellect, beyond this. It couldn't stand up any longer.
Well,
and so,
go ahead. Yeah, but let me say this. The diversity that came immediately after affirmative action, the diversity push, that used to consist of someone from the affirmative action or HR office going to a college or university trying to recruit talented minorities. It wasn't about going into the workplace and bullying and shaming people. The DEI is just closely akin to critical race theory. And so after George Floyd's death, it took off like on steroids in a way that was just terribly, I don't know what the word I want to use is, but in a way that just openly and blatantly violated any semblance of the law. Old-fashioned affirmative action, people complained about it. It was preferential treatment, but it only went so far. This was over the top.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, this was manipulative. It was a bullying measure. And as we've learned, as we all have learned in the sandbox of life, when our first days of school, is that when you were attacked by a bully, you had to bully back. If not, they owned you for the rest of your career. Right?
That's right. And one of the chapters in the book, I'm going to read the title of this chapter. It's A Not So Inconvenient Death, the Martyrdom of George Floyd. And it's about how the left, they made a martyr out of him. They celebrated, the death of George Floyd. And if you actually look at the whole video of his death, if you look at the 3 autopsies, the first autopsy did not say that he was murdered by the police officer. It had, all kinds of things was wrong with George Floyd, including the fentanyl that he had in his system. The family had 2 additional autopsies. And so he was not a saint, but he became a martyr for the left because they wanted to push through this aggressive race-based agenda.
Yeah, you can't let a good crisis go to waste like that, right? And and I think they were surprised at the traction that this got.
I mean, and look at the money that was poured into Black Lives Matter, and we know that the organization is bankrupt now, or close to being bankrupt, because the money was spent, and the millions of dollars that Van Jones got, and I know about Van Jones. Ibram, Kendi. He also has benefited tremendously, but Van Jones, took the money that Jeff Bezos gave him, and he's broke. I mean, millions of dollars poured into the coffers of organizations and individuals that are not about any kind of racial healing or reconciliation. These are people that are all about conflict and divisiveness and keeping it alive.
Yeah. And how does that filter down? Like you said earlier, it's like, like I was talking with Bob Woodson, who because I was talking to him about the war on poverty. Here we've spent since 1964, Carol, probably close to $30 trillion of the people's money. And I said, Bob, where'd it go? What happened? Oh, Bill, you got to understand, 70% of that money went to black bureaucrats administering the, those monies on the war on poverty. I said, you got to be kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of that money trickles up to the 1%. And white progressives would love for there to be reparations for blacks because it would end up in their pockets.
Exactly. It's amazing how that consistently happens. And this is, again, one of those areas that we all need to open our eyes to. We're talking with Dr. Carol Swain, her book, The Adversity of Diversity. Carol, the recent, the first presidential debate happened. And I thought it was interesting, after all the discussion about abortion that the Republicans have been involved in, that they seem to not have a real strategy. The Democrats continue to use this as a wedge. I mean, there was a reason that Dobbs was reversed and it went back to the states. This was an organic response. Right now, we have, a lot of positive things happening. Of course, the mainstream media is not reporting on this. But in my humble opinion, Carol, I really like to get your read on this, because minorities, blacks and Hispanics, have been greatly affected by Roe v. Wade. And my issue is that this should not be a public discussion. If someone is in that situation that needs to consider an abortion, that should be between the woman, the father, and the doctor. It should not be a public debate. And I believe the only reason that it makes it a public debate is because they're so disingenuous. They won't be honest enough to tell you the reason that we're bringing it out in the public is because we need to raise funds for Planned Parenthood, and we do it with taxpayers' money.
Well, it's about Planned Parenthood, but it's also about, the Democrats and their strategy to keep people polarized. They make it seem like abortions have been outlawed across the country when we know that's not what happened. When Roe was overturned. It meant that in the 50 states, the voters get to choose. And so some states have restricted abortions. Some are more liberal. People that need abortions can vote with their feet. And abortions have been almost like genocide when it comes to Black and Hispanic populations.
Exactly.
And as far as the candidates in the Republican debate, they flounder around because they don't have core values and principles. If they did have core values and principles, they would already have an answer. They wouldn't even have to think about it. It'd be just like the snap of a finger. Exactly. They need to, just let us know where they stand and move on. But we can also say that Fox News, they knew exactly what they wanted. They asked questions that the questions don't really benefit the American people because it's not necessarily the issues that we care the most about. So it's entertainment, and that is largely what happened during the Republican debate.
Yeah, well, it touches on an issue that I believe that we're still trying to figure out. Although, this report states that since the Supreme Court issued the Dobbs decision, Carol, 25 states, half the country, now have some sort of legislation protecting the unborn.
I think that's wonderful.
I do too. I think so as well, because if we're going to get this country back on track, that's a first principle that is absolutely key. We have to choose life. Life is critical to the future of this democratic republic. I would dare say to the world.
I agree with you, Bill. And while we're talking about Republicans, I can say that they are part of the problem when it comes to DEI and CRT, because so many of them either don't understand it or they're supportive of it. And you see
Right.
the Republican Party catering, to identity groups.
Mhm.
And that's something that if they were actually following the Republican platform that caused me to become a Republican, many decades ago, um, then we wouldn't have all this confusion among Republican candidates, but they are all over the place. They don't have a set of values and principles. And when it comes to DEI, it seems that any Black person that smiles at them and
Mhm.
says, I'm a Black Republican, they would tout them out front. And these people sometimes embarrass them because they will join the side that calls all Republicans racist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to your point here, Carol, is that if you don't hold to strong values, if you're not holding to the mission that you mentioned before, in knowing that it either supports unity or it takes away. And
Right.
that's the proposition. Anything that comes into your purview, does it add or take away from these foundational principles that unify us for the good of all concerned? If it takes one little bit away, then it has to be invalid. And you've got to be prepared to answer that question. Otherwise, you're going to be part of the uniparty and you're going to lose your way.
And the political left talks about unity. I mean, any concept that's, that's whether it's freedom or unity, they grab the concepts and then they change the meaning. And
Exactly.
so when they're talking about unity, they're not talking about bringing people together across racial, ethnic, political lines. They're talking about making people believe exactly what they believe in a
Right.
particular sphere. And that's unity. And you have freedom to do what you want as long as you want to do what they tell you to do. I mean,
Exactly.
it's just total opposite of what liberty and freedom and unity are supposed to be about. And unless we as Americans learn and know our rights, our constitutional rights, our civil rights laws, and what's taking place in our government, state, local, and federal, as well as our institutions, we're not going to be able to protect anything that we have or our children and our descendants. We will not be able to save America to the extent that it can be saved if we
Exactly.
don't know our rights and be willing to stand up for them. And that's why it's so important to get knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, we say often, Carol, that you must own your own knowledge. I mean, here they're listening to you and and I always tell our audience, don't just take our word for it. Hopefully we are motivating and encouraging you to do a deeper dive and own this. Don't, pick it up like a bumper sticker and spout off a talking point. Bring something to the discussion, something of substance that's going to add to our liberty, our idea and understanding of liberty, because that is the most powerful thing I believe that God has given us. Liberty, that I believe is our birthright. And we're called not to abuse that, because we know how God felt when Esau disrespected his birthright, right?
That's right.
Well, Carol, we've got about a minute left here. And again, congratulations on the book, The Adversity of Diversity. I'm going to let you summarize the key point and what you want the audience, the reader, to take away from the book, and also how they can be connected to you and get their hands on a copy of your book.
I want people to know that this is a book that's easy to read and it's well documented. It has resources, and this book will equip you, your family, you and your family, to protect your civil rights and civil liberties when it comes to workplace discrimination, educational discrimination, and discrimination that you may encounter because of your race or your sex or your religion. And we have covered the workplace, corporations, what's taking place in the corporations. I share about higher education. We look at George Floyd's death and how that fueled this industry, and we provide a solution. And I believe that this is one of the most important books I've ever written, and that I would encourage, people to get a copy, read it. It's in ebook form as well as paperback. And
Mhm.
starting in September, it will be in audio book form. And you can
Excellent.
order your books at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or if you live in Nashville or Tennessee, Logos Nashville has signed copies that
Oh,
you
wow.
can pick up or order online. And Logos Nashville is a Christian bookstore.
Excellent. Wow. Very cool. Dr. Carol Swain, author of Adversity of Diversity. Carol, again, thank you so much for blessing us,
Thank
not
you.
only with your talents and your gifts, and certainly your time this afternoon to have this discussion about your new book. May all be well with you. Thank you so much. Take care. Dr. Carol Swain has been our guest. For more information and for you to be a part of this mighty Martinez movement to return to God and to save our country, go to BillMartinezShow.com. May God bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious unto you and give you peace. Go and be blessed and share it with everyone you meet. Thank you for being with us. Take care.